Hi, Jazz Theory class. Today we're going to talk about rhythmic alteration and melodic paraphrase, or simply put, the concept of applying swing rhythm or common practice swing rhythm to some melodies. Most jazz theory classes tend to focus on melody and harmony exclusively, but because of the three elements of music, rhythm, melody, and harmony, in the world of jazz, I would make the argument that rhythm is the most important one. So without further ado, we're going to look at this melody, Billy Boy, which is a very square, on the beat kind of melody. And we're going to look at some different methods of rhythmic alteration or melodic paraphrase to make it swing a little bit more. So let's take a quick listen to Billy Boy, the original melody first. And that's what's example 1-1 here. And it's featuring my favorite saxophone player. It's me. Okay, and as you can see from the sheet music, this particular melody is very square and on the beat all the way through. It doesn't have a lot of syncopation whatsoever, so this is kind of a perfect melody to take and try to apply some jazz concepts to. I'm going to skip over example 1-2 here, but this is a good example of a jazz melody. They tend to look pretty ugly on sheet music because that syncopation, well, this Western music notation wasn't really designed with the idea of syncopation in mind. So these melodies tend to look a little bit uglier when they do have a normal amount of jazz syncopation to them. So we're going to start off with this first example, which is rhythmic alteration, and very simply put, rhythmically altering the melody. Some of those notes will get shifted forward, which is called anticipation. Ba ba ba. Instead of being on that downbeat, this one is right on the and a 4. Or the concept of delay, which if anticipation is putting it a little bit forward, delay would be rhythmically pushing it back, in this case, like an eighth note or maybe a quarter note. So let's take a quick listen to that same melody, but this time it will be altered using anticipation and delay. Okay, and as you can tell, it's immediately got a very different sort of character or feeling to it. And this is some very basic swing concepts. It's the exact same melody. Hopefully, you can still hear that, um, except that it has all these sort of rhythmic surprises. And you notice that the anticipation and delay, overall, it looks like a little bit more anticipation than delay going on in here, but it is kind of mixed up in a rather random order. It's not every other, it's not all anticipation, then all delay, but just kind of freely mixed together. So that's the first important quality. Let's go ahead and move on to some other tactics here. So this next example is actually my favorite example. How to do rhythmic anticipation and delay badly, because it can be done badly. This first example, you notice, has nothing but anticipation, which will give it a kind of unnatural sound. And it's mixed up here in the second example, except that it's almost every single note is anticipated, and it does sound a little bit corny. So here is example 1-4. And here's next. So you want to be careful not to do too much anticipation or too much delay. This very first one, it sounded really repetitive because rhythmically it's identical. 3, 4, and ba 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 da. When you're using anticipation and delay, you want the music to feel kind of natural, which means not exactly the same figure back to back. So a couple more examples of this. These are four really good examples of that ba boo da ba 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 boo ba 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 ba, that original melody, altered in different ways. And I think you'll find one that you like more than the others, or honestly, it's the possibilities. Even though we're talking about 3 bars and a pickup, are kind of infinite in terms of mixing up and how you use anticipation and delay. So here's example 1-5. Okay. Okay, and of these 4 examples, they all work. They all have a little bit of a different character to them. So going further on, our next tactic besides just using anticipation and delay is the concept of finding repeat notes. And in this case, it's the same original melody, but all the repeated pitches that are right next to each other are all circled here. And this next example is eliminating repetitions. And you can do this 2 ways, by shortening notes, not playing some of those repeated notes, or tying them all together. So here's example 1-7. Okay, and you notice that it's got a generally more legato sound because all those repeat notes aren't breaking each other up in those longer phrases there. Let's see here. This next one, example 1-8, rhythmic alteration that retains or adds note repetitions. So you can also break up those repeat notes by adding extra notes, and this is what that sounds like. Okay, and you can see those added notes sort of put in these circles here. You notice this is also using anticipation, delay, and that adding of adding repeated notes as we kind of go along here. Example 1-9, this is just another example, kind of combining all those elements in a different way of the full melody. All right, and I kind of like that version personally. Just moving on forward here. The next is actually more of an articulation thing than a rhythmic thing. This is the concept of what is called fragmentation. And in fragmentation, you're going to notice, oh, there's a lot of rests. So essentially, fragmentation means to take the long notes, ba boo da boo da, and turn them short, ba boo da booed up, like so. So this example 1-9, I believe, is the exact same example as, 1-10 is the exact same as example 1-9. However, all the long notes have been fragmented, creating these sort of rests or creating this sort of suspense as we wait for that next note to happen. So here is example 1-10. Okay, and you might, for those of you who are big band players, you might recognize this sounds a lot like the tune Cute because it sounds cute. But the tune Cute is also full of this kind of fragmentation. And it does sound cute, let's be honest here. Let's see. This next example, fragmentation with lyrics. So vocalists, you have to be careful when you're fragmenting things. You only ever want to fragment a note that's at the end of a phrase, not in the middle. So for example, here's fragmenting with lyrics. This is a pretty hip melody. However, if you're using words, it makes no sense. Oh, where have you been, Billy boy, Billy boy? Oh, it sounds weird. Billy boy, breaking up Billy boy, which should really be one kind of phrase. So if you're a vocalist, you have to think about how you're going to use fragmentation to make something hipper and not sort of like butcher the phrasing of a sentence or a particular phrase. So a couple remedies for syllable splits. Charming Billy, Billy, just like you would apply your natural rhythm when you sing, in terms of changing rhythms, you'd want it to still feel sort of natural. Charming Billy is the original, but Charming Billy sounds a lot more natural, and it swings, and it has a little bit of anticipation on top of that. Let's see here. So connecting tones, this is our next step, and this is where we're moving out of the rhythmic realm and more into like melodic ornamentation kind of concepts. But there are different types of connecting tones. So in this case, we're trying to get from the note G to C. Boo-dee-da, or whatever it sounds like. But this is the original phrase, and you can connect it in different ways. In this case, just connecting it very simply with a ascending scale from the key that you're in. In this case, we're in the key of C, so you can see all those notes from C major. Chords are 2, 5, 1 in C major. The notes of C major are going to work. You can connect them chromatically, in which case you use a chromatic scale as opposed to your diatonic scale, which is going to lead to a lot more notes, and you can see it's rhythmically a lot busier. Or connecting material can be a combination of both diatonic and chromatic, and I think this is the most common jazz sound where you hear this combination of chromatic and diatonic tones connecting things. So let's take a quick listen to these examples. I'll play through the original, diatonic, chromatic, and then the combination. There we go. Yeah, and you can hear how they have a different kind of character, each one, as we go along. So let's go back and listen to our original rhythmic alteration, just so we have a point of context, and then we'll listen to the same thing with connecting material in it. So here's 114. Okay, so that should be a little bit familiar at this point. You notice this particular rhythmic alteration uses a lot of anticipation. Ba-boo-da, ba-boo-ah, a little bit ahead. Do-ah. You see all these eighth notes on the ands of fours and ands of twos making up for our very sort of half note kind of original rhythm that we had. All right, so let's look at an example that involves some of these connecting tones in between. That's 115 here. And you see this bracket that says D, that means it's diatonic connecting material. C means that we have a chromatic connecting material. And in this case, C and D, like this particular line, is a combination G to F, in the key of B flat. That's a diatonic step. F to E flat, that's chromatic material right there. So it's a combination of chromatic and diatonic all together. So let's take a quick listen to this. This is 115. Okay, and you're starting to think probably, oh, it sounds a little bit more like jazz than it did before because it's combining some of that Again, it's all the goal points. Ba boo da boo da is from our original anticipated version of this melody, but all the connections in between, those longer notes, are filled in with some connecting material. All right, let's move on down. And this example 16/7, I'm not going to play it, but it's very helpful to look at because this is put together using a target note kind of method. If this and of 4 is our target, it's just preceded by some connecting material. So if our target notes are C, you can use what are called upper neighbors, like the diatonic upper step or the chromatic upper step from C to D flat to C, or your lower neighbors. If we're in the key of B flat, down to B flat and back would be the diatonic step, or if we're in B flat, down to B natural, from C to B natural to B, would be our chromatic step below. So the concept of using neighbor tones above and below. Alternatively, you can do what's referred to sometimes as a little turn. If C and C are our tones right there, you can do a double approach where you take a step above and a step below, in this case diatonically, a diatonic step up and a chromatic step below from D to B to C, or a double chromatic approach where you've got a chromatic step above, chromatic step above, chromatic step below. Or you can sort of mix it up where you have a chromatic step above and a diatonic step below to get from C to C. So again, there are like about a cajillion options just with anticipation, delay, and connecting material, or taking out repeat notes, adding repeat notes, adding fragmentation. So let's go ahead and kind of wash our ears out by listening to a different rhythmic alteration. And from here, we're going to put some other combinations together. So here is 118. And this is just a simple, again, rhythmic alteration using, it looks like, anticipation, a little bit of delay, and also some fragmentation, because you notice there are some rests in this melody where there used to be none before. So here is example 118. All right, apologies. I took some liberties there, and I think I added a turn between that B flat and G, so my bad. I was having too much fun while doing this, I guess. All right, so that's our initial rhythmic alteration. But let's go ahead and move on down, and we're going to hear some of those upper neighbor, lower neighbor with the UN all kind of like marked out, and CT, changing tones. Just kind of like marked throughout. So we have this melody with a lot of fragmentation, which lends itself really well to having these approach tones to get there. So here's example 119. Okay, I guess I heard I added an extra little turn there. I guess I got bored doing this. So anyhow, you can hear those like twists and turns that add some sort of interest to this melody that otherwise, again, was very on the beat and very sort of like static, rhythmically speaking, but also static, a lot of repeat notes. You notice that those turns oftentimes take the place of, or in this case, you see that FF following each other. Those turns precede repeat notes or sometimes replace repeat notes often. All right, let's go ahead and keep on moving. Let's go ahead and listen to 120. This is just a different version of rhythmic alteration right here. All right, right, so that's our initial rhythmic alteration for this next example. And 121 is going to actually take a lot of these combinations, some fragmentation, um, you know, repeat notes, taking out notes, adding some fills, or I should say connecting tones more than fills, but honestly, fills and connecting tones are really the same concept, along with, of course, our goals are coming from here, and you see this, anticipation, anticipation, delay stuff going on. So again, those goal notes and then sort of like ornamenting its way into it. This is how you take a sort of square melody and then using, again, rhythm and connecting material to create melodic paraphrase or rhythmic interest, which is a really important part of jazz music. So let's go ahead and take a listen to example 121. Okay, and even though it's gotten significantly more complex, you can still hear that original melody in there because that is the skeleton that this thing is built upon. All right, that covers it for our concepts regarding melodic paraphrase and rhythmic alteration. For your guys' homework, you need to take a nursery rhyme, simple, square, on the beat kind of tune, and using these methods of anticipation, delay, repeat notes, connecting repeat notes or taking away repeat notes, fills, whether we're talking about diatonic or chromatic, or turns, diatonic or chromatic, and putting all these concepts together to take a very square tune like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or something like that, or even a church hymn, or anything that moves in, quarter note and half step, whole step kind of rhythm, and to make it sound a little bit more like jazz. All right, that covers it for today.